Essential question. When is it important to show kindness? Snow White and Rose Red by Brothers Grimm, retold by Daniel Munn, illustrated by Olivia Chin Mueller. There once was a woman who lived in a cottage with her two kind and cheerful children, Snow White and Rose Red. The girls often ran about the forest and gathered berries. The hare would eat out of their hands. The stag leapt merrily by them, and the birds sat upon the tree branches and sang. As I read the beginning of the story describing the girls, I am visualizing the forest and the animals in it. I can picture details that are not described in the story using all my senses. I imagine the details from my own experiences in a forest. I imagine the sounds and songs of the birds and the leaves rustling in the trees. I picture in my mind green leaves, red berries, blue and gray birds, a brown deer, and a tan hare or a rabbit. I imagine the touch of the animal's fur and the coolness of the shade in the forest, as well as the smell of the trees. One evening, as the family sat together, someone knocked at the door. "Quick, Rose Red, open the door. It might be a traveler seeking shelter," said the mother. Rose Red went and pulled open the door. It was a giant bear! He stretched his broad brown head through the doorway. Good readers create pictures in their minds as they read to help them understand the text better. When I read page 26, I imagine Rose Red walking quickly to answer the door, expecting to see a tired traveler. Then I pictured the surprised looks on all three family members' faces when a large and scary animal sticks its head inside. I think about when I'm surprised by something unexpected and a little scary, my heart beats faster and I might jump back or scream. This helps me understand what is happening in the story and how Rose Red feels. By visualizing the events, I can understand the story better. Rose Red sprang back. "Do not be afraid. I will do you no harm," said the bear. "I am half frozen and only want to warm myself by your fire." "Poor bear," said the mother. "You may rest here by the hearth. You will be safe from the cold weather." In the morning, the children opened the door. The bear trotted out across the snow into the forest. The bear returned every evening at the same time and sat himself down by the hearth. The family came to expect their visitor each night. They kept a warm blanket ready for him and saved some of their dinner. They never locked the door until after their friend arrived. Spring finally came. "Thank you," said the bear. "You have been so kind, but I must go into the forest and find my treasure. The dwarf who stole it lives below the frozen ground during the winter. Now, as the sun warms the earth, he comes out to steal again." Snow White sadly unbolted the door. As the bear hurried out, he caught against the bolt and a piece of his furry coat tore off. For a moment, Snow White thought she saw gold shining through it. A short time later, the mother sent her children into the forest to collect firewood. There, they found a big tree lying on the ground. Near the trunk, something jumped back and forth in the grass, but they could not make out what it was. As they came closer, they saw a dwarf with an old withered face and a long white beard. He had snagged the end of his beard between the twisted roots of the tree. The little fellow jumped about, not knowing what to do. After reading this part about the dwarf, I am picturing him too. I picture a very small fairy tale creature with a long white beard. I imagine a twisted brown root sticking out of the ground with rough bark. I can see how the dwarf's long beard can get stuck in the root, and I picture him frustrated and mad because he is stuck. I picture him jumping up and down, back and forth. Even though the story does not describe the sounds he makes, I imagine him grunting a little as he tries to free himself from the tree root. By visualizing the description in the story, based on my own experiences and imaginings, I understand the experience of the dwarf character better. He glared and cried, "Why do you stand there? Come over here and help me." The kind children tried very hard, but they could not pull the beard free. "You are useless!" roared the dwarf. Then Snow White cut off the end of the beard. The dwarf grabbed a bag full of gold nearby. As he lifted it up, he grumbled to himself, "Rude girls cut off a piece of my fine beard. Bad luck to you both!" And then he swung the bag upon his back and went off. Later, the mother sent her 2 daughters to town. The road led them across a field where they noticed a large bird hovering in the air. It sank lower and lower. "Ah! Help me!" came a loud cry. They ran up and saw that the bird had snatched the dwarf. The children grabbed the little man and pulled until the bird let him go. The dwarf cried, "You could have done that more carefully. You tore my coat." Then he took up the bag of gold and slipped away into his hole. The girls, used to his rudeness, went on their way. On their way home, they surprised the dwarf, who had emptied out his bag of gold. The children stood still and stared at the treasure. "Why are you staring?" shouted the dwarf accusingly. His face became crimson with rage. Here are some descriptive words on the page that help me visualize the story. When I read, "His face becomes crimson with rage," I pictured the dwarf's face all red. And when I compare my mental image with the illustration, I can see that the dwarf's face was much redder than the illustration. Just then, a bear came trotting toward them. The dwarf cried, "Dear Mr. Bear, spare me! I will give you my treasure." The dwarf scurried away while the bear began to gather the gold. The frightened girls began to run away. The bear called to them, "Snow White and Rose Red, do not be afraid." They recognized the voice of their bear friend. Suddenly, there stood a young man clothed in gold. When I look at the illustration on page 40, I see the part at the end with the prince dressed in gold. There's a lot of excitement that happens before the scene. Close your eyes as I reread page 40 and imagine the girls frightened and starting to run away. The frightened girls began to run away. The bear called to them, "Snow White and Rose Red, do not be afraid." They recognized the voice of their bear friend. Suddenly, there stood a young man clothed in gold. So they're taking quick steps away from the large bear when they hear a familiar voice, and it's a voice of a friend they know very well. It's their bear from earlier in the story, and the most amazing part is the bearskin fell off to show a young man dressed in gold. I imagine the bear's fuzzy fur falling off like a coat, revealing a young man in fine clothes made of glittering gold fabric. What a difference that would be. "I am a prince," he said. "That dwarf changed me into a bear and then stole my treasure. I have had to live in the forest as a bear until I could get my treasure back." The prince was so grateful for their kindness, he shared his treasure with them.